Well, you ready to move on?
Yeah, I would like to first stop down and thank Murray Media for having us at your studios.
No,
That's very
we're
kind for your
always,
support.
well, you're very kind, but we're always delighted to be a part of the team, as they say. So, and certainly we've known each other for some time, but just all you continue to do on behalf of America's Future Series and all these entities that you go off here, there, and whatever. And again, some of the people that we've had a chance to listen to over the months and years is really and again, this is not my forte, but to listen to some of these things, I go, yeah, I never thought of that. That's great. That's great. So
well, you've been incredibly supportive, and you've really helped make this all possible. So I want to thank you for that.
Well,
I'd like to also thank Sam and TMG Core for that conversation and for them being our platinum sponsor. And I'd like to thank See Here for their support, et cetera, being our title sponsor. I hope everyone will check them out. I think there's an opportunity for them to do a lot of great good, not only for other companies, but also for our national security apparatus.
And like all of them, my son and I, Murray Media, most excited to be here. So thank you. Brad Furnish is our next guest, I guess, is where we're moving on to. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd like to bring Brad on.
Yeah. Okay, good. Brad is the Vice President of Sales and Strategy at TMG Core. He is currently engaged with business development and strategic initiatives to help both private and public sectors utilize high-performance computing by leveraging immersion cooling solutions. Sounds fascinating, huh? Well, we're about to be a part of it. And prior to his role at TMG Core, Brad spent some time at Gartner, at CyrusOne, and I might add, where's your baseball cap, my friend? He was a professional baseball player.
Yep, I was. It's been a fun ride.
And well, you've got to tell. You got to just take 10 seconds, Brad. You know, as a former sports anchor for 30 years, you got to tell me, were you pitcher, catcher, fielder? What was the case?
I was a wrong-handed pitcher, so left-handed.
Everybody needs an LHD.
But I can't say you definitely have the voice to be a sportscaster, and definitely you have a great voice for it. It'd be fun to listen to you.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate it, and we're delighted to have you on board as well, Brad. So David and I are going to step aside. It's all yours, my friend. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. You know, this panel, we are focused on leveraging commercial tech to speed government innovation. And with us today, we have a few different experts that have a vast amount of experience in those areas and in those arenas, both in and out of the public sector. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and meet them. First and foremost, or no particular order, we have George Lamont. George is the Chief Information Security Officer and Chief Information Officer at IronNet. George served our nation as a colonel at the U.S. Cyber Command and authored the first ever joint cyber training and certification standards and cyber flag exercise, which serves today as the DoD's gold standard for building a premier workforce. Jason Kim is the CEO of Millennium Space Systems, a Boeing subsidiary based in El Segundo, California. Millennium Space Systems delivers high-quality small satellites across all orbits, from missile warning to advanced national security space missions. Millennium rapidly delivers affordable prototype and constellation solutions. Jason also served our nation in the U.S. Air Force and attended the U.S. Air Force Academy. We also have Todd Edmonds. Todd is the global CTO of Industrial IoT and Edge Computing and a strategic innovation technology leader at Dell Technologies, as well as one of the leads for the company's digital twin innovation and strategy team. Todd is an industry expert with 25 plus years of experience in smart manufacturing, industry 4.0, industrial IoT, digital twin, and edge computing, having previously honed his skills at Cisco, Rockwell Automation, and as an IoT solution integrator. Outside of Dell, Todd leads the manufacturing work group for the Digital Twin Consortium and chairs the Edge Computing Task Group and the Industrial Internet Consortium. And then we also have Dr. William Chappell. He is the Chief Technology Officer of Mission Engineering and Vice President of Mission Systems at Microsoft Corporation. He is currently bootstrapping efforts for developing advanced cloud technologies focused on space, 5G, and critical infrastructure. Prior to his role at Microsoft, he was the Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency and Microsystems Technology Office. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining. I know that we have a lot of ground to cover, and it's going to be a very exciting conversation. And so without wasting time, let's get into it. And this one I'll kick to Jason first off and let people go from there. But throughout history, we have seen different technologies created for specific use cases in both the private and public sectors that have been leveraged by the other sector. Over the last several years, there's been an increase in focus for the public sector to leverage commercial technologies. How specifically has your industry and your company experienced this evolution, and how do you approach this new focus?
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having us on. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Great. It's great to share the forum with all of our key suppliers here today. To answer your question, our approach is to bring commercial tech where it makes sense. At the end of the day, our customers need high performance systems quickly. We all know that. Where it makes sense, we'll space qualify commercial tech that maintains quality and furthers our ability to deliver systems rapidly and affordably. And a somewhat related change to evolving practices is the incorporation of dual-use commercial technology, especially in space. We've been able to space qualify and test commercial tech to deliver solutions faster to our customers. I'll give you an example. Our batteries, the batteries we use in our spacecraft, they use the same cells that you'd find in your electric cars. The large volume commercial industry, including the automotive sector, have really driven piece part component quality, reliability, and safety to the point that we're able to use them for space applications. So I'm looking forward to the dialogue today.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very interesting. George, you want to chime in?
Oh, absolutely, Brad. Thank you. And can you hear me okay? Great. I always like to do a mic check before I go into my full-on diatribe. And I really do appreciate being with this panel. Jason, thanks for your service. Air Force seems to be ruling the day here on this panel. And not to demean any of the other services, and the rest of my company corporation partners, this is really a great group to have, and I appreciate you assembling these folks, Brad. So when I think of the question you just asked, specific evolution and how do we approach with this new focus, top of mind comes to me three basic topics: cloud transformation, mergers and acquisitions, and convergence of IT/OT. And when I think of cloud transformation and how do we approach this, these are no longer the days of our old on-prem only systems and physically segmented networks, although those certainly still do exist. We're forcing an evolution across cybersecurity industry to migrate to the cloud for economic reasons, costs, value, outsourcing of technical talent and technologies, data access connectivities with a whole host of folks to include telecoms, et cetera, all pushing in this direction. These are all supporting multiple deliveries as well. Our company does on-prem cloud deliveries, and of course, not all clouds are created equal. Not to dismay my Azure panel member, but you've got the bigs are AWS, Google Cloud, Azure. So not every one of those is the same. And it's not just as simple to go from an on-prem delivery to creating a VM, a virtual machine, and then expecting that to work as it was in every single environment. So then there's the strategic and corporate government relationships. I may be buying something from someone because of those things and those pieces in place. How do I approach that? All in the context of cloud transformation. Mergers and acquisitions have continued to kind of confound us in the security space because they create huge vulnerabilities and technology gaps. Companies are consolidating. And when you bring on a new component or company or entity that is rife with all sorts of risk that you have to consider in this particular space. And I know it's going to sound like heresy, but sometimes they don't include the technologist in those conversations and decisions until after the fact, right? We don't want to get in the way of the lawyers and the executives, right? With all this detail. And so who are we connected to? Who are we doing business with? Who are we outsourcing to? All of those things kind of create an issue for us that I'm not sure we've completely evolved to. And then, of course, the convergence of ITOT that my fellow panelists will obviously have way farther and better to say. But we've seen criminal nation state actors alike take advantage of this evolution in a number of areas, most recently through supply chain attacks, either downloading fake updates or sophisticated compromise of 0 days. Pick your poison, solar winds or Log4Shell. All of those things come to top of mind. So those three topics from an evolutionary perspective over the last decade are absolutely important here. And how do we secure the infrastructure that we're left with just those three topics among many is equally complex and challenging. And you have to be able to really see the environment in order to defend it. Standards like NIST 800 TAC XXX, right? The DFARS contracting language, FedRAMP, capability maturity models, privacy laws, GDPR, CCPA, pick one of the many that require time, effort, and expense to actually get those things done. And it's not always helpful, getting products to market and getting to the warfighter, who I think are kind of a large group of folks that are in this particular American Futures presentation. How do you get the thing that's going to be needed to defend and defeat? We're talking about the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, and how do we get those things past the contracting office to get into the hands of who needs to be there to get that job done in a quick and expedient way. And then, of course, there's the export control laws and all of those types of things that kind of hinder us at times, but are all meant for and well intended to take advantage or to ensure that we're not weaponizing technology in violations of treaties and in the pursuit of political, diplomatic, and other advantage. All of that, we're still in very early stages. And I know, Brad, I asked you to, when we were prepping for this panel, to make sure you had a safe word to stop me from rambling too heavily. But we as a company holistically approach this through the hiring of top talent, engineers, security experts, governance, risk, and compliance, to create and problem solve in this area to provide our customers support from a network detection and response capability.
That's awesome. You threw a lot of stuff out there that we're going to definitely unpack as we go forward, but I'm going to start with the first things first. And you talked about not all clouds are created equal. So with that, we might want to transition to Mr. Bill here and let him chat about it, because I know that they're doing some great things as well.
All right, great. Thanks for inviting me on this panel. You're right. The cloud is a important part of this next generation of digital transformation. It's happened commercially, and it's starting to happen in the DoD. And I think the question is, at what rate and how do we really harness the gift that the world has given us, which is the major cloud companies originated and are from this country. So when you have that level of inherent advantage as a country, how do you tap into it? And when I was at DARPA, I think you said I was the director of DARPA. Not quite true. The director of the Microsystems Technology Office. I do appreciate the promotion, but when I was part of the leadership team there, and we were sitting around trying to figure out what would it take to really tap into the inherent advantages our country has, right? With both innovation, and I think our economic system is the best in the world, but we also have scale. And that's something that I think people don't fully appreciate. When we have 64 regions where each region has multiple data centers inside of it, that's a scale of compute that we've never had, before along this planet. And it's not just us, right? There's a select few that can have really both the heft and the cash flow that can allow you to run that race to build the world's computer. So the world's computer is being established. It's being established primarily by US companies. You have to get to fourth or fifth now to find a Chinese company. But typically, these commercial capabilities don't accrue themselves to national security, right? And that's been the way in which we've isolated these and siloed these. And I think there's been a broad awakening that is a broken mindset, that our adversaries may not have that sort of distinction, right? That commercial runs as fast as far as it can. They have certain types of people and certain types of demographics that support that. And then the U.S. national interest is going to be supported by a subset of people that are isolated from that broader community. And that's a broken mindset. I think people are starting to understand and change. A lot of the policies are still hard, and but if I then step back and say, from 10 years ago when we were in the room trying to figure out how to induce this type of behavior, I mean, it's really amazing that many of the cloud companies now have national security wings, right? That I'm sitting here in our on a floor that's right above a football field-sized skiff where we're operating, a secret, now a top secret cloud in one of the largest companies, in the world. And so that 10 years ago was not an obvious thing that was going to happen. And so the maturity in which we've pushed the tech companies to be part of the national security landscape is something we should actually pat ourselves on the back some, right? While we still look at the challenges and say, we haven't quite, I think, figured it out and how to untap, all of that innovation and capability, right? So, I'm optimistic, and that's why I'm here. Went from the government side into the commercial sector to be a funnel for all of that innovation and funneling back into national security. When it works, you see sort of that virtuous cycle of entrepreneurship, personnel, creativity, all of that comes back into national security, where oftentimes it even starts, right? And I think this is it's a virtuous cycle, because many people think of, how do we get commercial into the DoD? Frankly, it's much more nuanced than that. How much of the DoD or the commercial stuff starts in the DoD? It goes into the commercial sector. We're fast followers. That's what entrepreneurs do, is take things that are invented in universities and push it out into economic reality. And then how do we make sure that we complete that loop? Because that loop is much healthier than, you do research out in the open, anyone in the world can harvest it. It gets put into the commercial domain first. It may or may not make it into national security. That you have to question that entire cycle unless you create the entire loop. And so hopefully what's happening, not just in the cloud, but within large tech companies, realizing that that's the virtuous cycle that they're living in, and not thinking that they invented everything, that they can be a part of that invention cycle and give back, is kind of this next decade, or at least the decade we're living in right now. And so I think that's the $1 trillion question that we're all kind of staring at. So.
Absolutely. And Todd, over to you.
Hey, thanks so much. And I'm truly honored and humbled to be a part of this. So really great to be here. Amazing speakers up to this point. Hopefully we can continue that trend. To Bill's point, there's a lot of change going on, and a lot of technology that's really advancing and really accelerating right now. You looked at, we already talked about 5G and edge compute and cloud and AI and machine learning. And from a Dell Technologies point of view, we're already starting to package some of those up and put those together to address some of the needs of the DoD and the military. So for example, we're partnering with Bill's company, with Microsoft, to do a tactical Microsoft Azure Edge at the edge, so that our warfighters can use that Azure wherever they need to go, and have that as a deployable, much more of a flexible, transportable way of connecting to that cloud and doing those type of cloud workloads. We're also partnered with the Air Force to do some work, and I know Colonel Hamilton was talking about this earlier, and I don't know if we're working with him or not, but we're working with the 59th Test and Evaluation Squadron to do some data collection on that F-35, where we're able to pull data off of a test flight of that F-35, and I'm sure Colonel Hamilton was probably part of that. That was kind of interesting to see that he was doing that. But we're able to pull that off in a fraction of the time that it typically takes, using some of the latest generation of technology, that partnership again, and be able to then process that and do that in terms of doing simulations, doing performance testing, doing maintenance testing, and really operational testing of that aircraft. So from a Dell Technologies point of view, we're already doing a lot of this, and sometimes it does go from the public sector to the private sector, and sometimes it goes from the other way. And so we're from a Dell point of view, we're happy to embrace it either way and really help from multiple different angles.
And that's awesome. And thank you all for answering that. And I mean, you all touched on some different things and, some of where we've been to in the past, and Bill, to your point, needing to pat ourselves on the back. And then, we touched on where we can go in the forward. So this dovetails into a nice, easy question, that we've kind of touched on, but I definitely want to dig a little deeper is, what are some upcoming benefits that we have of incorporating commercial technologies into the DoD space, and where do we go from there? George, why don't you start that? Yeah, let's start with George.
Absolutely happy to, and thanks for that. The first thing that also comes to mind for me on that particular topic is, you think the commercial space is increased innovation, agility, speed to outcome, all of those things. But having been on the department side, federal side for over 28 years, retired, you could probably see some of the tchotchkes on the back wall. The reality is a little bit different. And we have examples of outstanding speed to need and outcomes, but that's not necessarily the case. And I think we've got a lot of work still to do here. The images of the old Pentagon Wars, right? Kelsey Grammer building the Bradley fighting vehicle and those types of things come to mind, because I'm now dating myself. But then things like simple use of technologies like cell phones on the battlefield. Everybody kind of grimaces when you hear that kind of thing, to accomplish calling in medical or rescue or resupply or tactical information, those types of things. But the adversary gets a vote too. They can use that to, increase risk of geolocation, targeting, interception, et cetera. And then you start kind of diving down the road of hardening that system and the lack of durability. And then you come out with something completely on the other end by the time you get adoption. So the process is to operate and provide capability at scale and meet the rate of change of technologies is just really too slow, cost prohibitive, and many small mid-sized businesses just can't support it. To overcome even just some of the large business companies choose just not to go into federal and Department of Defense areas because they make that decision. It's just too costly. It's too hard to navigate. Things like, and this is not bashing, the FedRAMP process for cloud service providers. That you go out to the marketplace and you see there's really about 300 and some odd vendors that are actually on that list out of thousands that are in that space, and they're just choosing either not to, or it's just a process. And I get it's intended, but their throughput is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 plus vendors per year, or somewhere at that at any level. And then FedRAMP High is proportionally lower. CMMC and some of the DFARS requirements for contracting, the language is still being kind of worked, and the adoption is in flux. But it's been that way for a few years. We're trying to do the right thing collectively, but it's really hard. I do see opportunities and a desire to adopt to commercial tech, and there's really strong leadership across the board from, just as an example, CISA, DHS leadership, Jen Easterly, projects like FedRAMP Connect to accelerate that throughput for the processing for cloud service providers. But there's a lot of work to be done, and we just need to increase the throughput of that in a number of different areas, and across federal, state, and local, even, because they're all looking to each other to kind of create that opportunity.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Bill, do you got anything to add to that?
You restate the initial question, because I'm going to make sure I get the right focus on it.
I lost it.
What do you see as the benefits of incorporating commercial tech and innovations into DoD solutions?
I mean, like if you look at some of the obvious domains, AI and cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is one where, this distinction between, government cybersecurity and sort of society's cybersecurity, it's really thin line. No matter what, you're using the same software basis, same exposures get found on both sides, and the exposures on the commercial side might get poked first and have crippling effect on society anyway, right? So critical infrastructure, broadly defines both the defense base and the critical sectors for a reason. And dual use is the right way to think about that, and that you can't have one side protected and not the other. You're just pointing people in the other direction. So we stare at, I believe the new number is 26 billion cyber events per day across the globe. This is funneled to our headquarters, where we look and figure out what's going on around the world. That gets translated into our products. Question is, how do you take that inherent advantage that exists in our country and then make sure that that gets baked into the dual use aspects, both critical infrastructure and DoD, as fast as possible. So that's something that it goes to what I talked about earlier in terms of what is that inherent advantage that really the world has given us through our economic dominance and the scale, right? Then that's where scale turns into unique capabilities and unique insight. And we need to make sure that that's getting to the right people. Now in AI, something very similar. There's a real big divergence. There's things you can do sort of on your desktop and small computers and things that are happening at scale. Our largest neural net is 525 billion nodes. This is how we take, we would take something like this meeting, capture the video and capture the text and automate it, how it gets documented and summarized, so that if you didn't want to have to, I always love like, hey, you missed the meeting, here's a 60-minute recording of the thing that you missed. I missed it because I don't have 60 minutes to watch in the first place. So how do you automate, right, and denote what would be interesting and tailor that, to the individual? And that's the type of capability that's emerging out of the commercial domain. And it's really all about scale. The larger the system, the less fragile it is. The less fragile it is, and the more data that it has, the more you can trust it around some of the corner cases that make it fragile today. And so, we'll bake those into our products, but frankly, the government needs an AI supercomputer. It needs that scale that exists in the commercial domain, and then it needs a workforce that understands how to take that, what same thing that's baked into our product and actually baked into their product. So it's not that a company like Microsoft should do that. What we should build is the ecosystem and the underpinning capabilities that are handed off, right? So that you don't have to build that from scratch entirely in the DIB, because it makes no sense when you already have that size and scale and all the complexities figured out when you have the entire world polishing those capabilities. If you just look at something like linguistics, like we build our product to work in every country in the world. We actually did a demo where we had a very, very small tribal village, which wanted to use our products, and we were able to do natural language translation of our products for as small as 1,000 people. Right? That's a capability that has broad meaning to the DoD in terms of being able to have things that work wherever they happen to be around the globe. And so again, it's about translating the scale that exists within this country towards the niche capabilities. And there's a funnel, right, where you get it wrong by having the scale players, go all the way down to the niche funnel, right? And you get it wrong by just having the, niche build all the way from scratch. And I think that's the, that's the equilibrium we're trying to find, is how do you take all of that goodness, empower it so that people like Jason, George, less so Todd, because I think he's part of the top of that funnel, right? In terms of broadly applicable underpinnings, that then can end up in the niche state that DoD needs.
I'd add that, it sounds like Bill's going to try and replace panel guests with AI, but hopefully that's not the case. But I would add that, obviously there's a ton of investment and accelerated innovation in the private space, right? Lots and lots of investment from all over the companies, whether it's a Microsoft or a Dell or some of the smaller players that we've seen. There's so much investment there. But I think as that starts to filter down, you can a lot of times avoid some of that bleeding edge problem where it's kind of tested and it's, the first to market can rush out there and test that. That's not what we need for our warfighters. That's not what the DoD needs. But, I liken this to what we experience in manufacturing. In smart manufacturing, most manufacturers are probably 10 to 20 years behind in their technology, lots of technical debt in that. And a lot of times that's challenging, but a lot of times it's good too, because they avoid the failures, they avoid the bleeding edge, and they can then implement mature technologies like a lot of them are doing right now to be able to solve those problems. So I see that same here in this, in providing dual use from the DoD for the DoD as well.
Yeah, I like what I'm hearing, Brad. I love the idea about scale from Bill, and how do we make our systems more secure from George, and then the de-risking from Todd. I'll add another angle, which is, the benefit to Millennium is twofold. We're talking about rapid delivery timelines to our customers and cost savings. So the commercial tech just further enables our ability to deliver high performance systems to our customers more rapidly and affordably. Without sacrificing performance, we can quickly space qualify the latest commercial technologies and apply them to these high stakes critical missions to pass on the cost and schedule savings. But the different angle that I want to bring to the panel is another benefit is incorporating the commercial tech. It allows us the ability to attract talent in this area. And what I mean by that is because we're using the software and technologies that's commonly used in the commercial industry, sometimes in the consumer world, it's a direct transfer of those experienced people to my world, which is space. Only now it's, one of the coolest and most innovative sectors you can work in today, that is space. And so, folks from Dell, folks from Microsoft, or any other commercial company out there, that software experience is readily transferable to space.
Absolutely. All fantastic points, and all part of the reason why we're here. And now to flip it the other way, and I know we've touched a little bit on it, and Bill, we'll start with you on this one, but there are some significant challenges that are apparent and that we've been touched on. But in your opinion, what do you see as the most significant challenges for the near future?
Well, in terms of the dual use side, it's, I think the personnel aspects have always been the most challenging, right? We've made choices through the years that we wanted to bring the world's best scientists and engineers to this country, and it's how we've had the economic dominance we've had and the national security dominance that we've had. And so the split of economic focus and national security focus, and that different people are on different sides of that line, are it's still baked into a lot of our policies and laws. And so as you blur those lines, really taking a look at those and figuring out how to make sure that the best people in our country are able to apply their craft and skills to national security. The worst thing you can do is train up a bunch of people that can't then participate in that virtuous cycle that I described earlier. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way that the policies and rules have been set up through the years. So to me, I think it's, doing things. If you look at from the cloud perspective, we have air gap clouds, we have separate clouds, we run those with U.S. citizens. That's great. We also then have the rest of the company, which is an order of magnitude larger. And how do you use really the intrigue of national security? It really is a powerful draw, and we have a lot of people across the country that raise their hand and say, I want to participate. How do you allow them that ability to bridge that gap and participate with as little barrier as possible?
Absolutely. That's a great point. You mentioned, a lot of great things, and George, from a cybersecurity perspective or just some other perspectives, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, Bill nailed it. I double down on the talent topic. One of my final role as an Air Force officer in my position at U.S. Cyber Command was Director of Training and Exercises under General Keith Alexander, who they're going to, I guess, hand an award to later on this afternoon in this futures program. But when we were devising the joint certification standards, the work roles, and it's just an interesting story as to how to create these cyber mission teams involved a neighborhood of around 40 to 50 different work roles. Now, when you think of a company, a small business, or even large, to have 40 to 50 different work roles in order to do something effectively, you would think it was crazy. But that was just kind of like the initial SWAT at this thing. And as you started talking to other entities and organizations, the intelligence community, logisticians, and to all the different other entities, there was the snowball effect where they were adding on additional work roles because we didn't think enough about them. People just don't have that level of depth and skill. You talk about the Great Resignation, right? We're not adding to the pile. It's actually shrinking to some degree. And it's not because people don't have the ability or skill. It's just because they're either pursuing other interests, or it's just something that they're not trying or interested in. The other part that I would want to mention, and the thing I was thinking about previously was, certifications and reciprocity, right? That's way more boring than talent and work roles. But the only way we could really get through that challenge is to accelerate that particular piece. The complexities mentioned, all the different entities we're dealing with, whether it be Department of Defense, specific services, federal agencies, or state and local government, is this strange conundrum or perception of not invented / approved here. Whereas I'm trying to get my technology into your environment, and the standard that I require is X or Z. It might be for healthcare, HIPAA. It could be for Department of Defense, the ones we've already mentioned. How do you get through that will be something we absolutely have to address as a challenge going forward in the future.
And I would actually double down on that too. I talked a little about the personnel. If you look at the divide, if you say that virtuous circle is the right way to view dual use, right? The divide is both in personnel. Really, the regulatory burden and then accreditation is the one that we're facing. That's the biggest split, right? Things that have been vetted, they work. They even work for parts of the other government, parts of the government that the other part the government won't accept. So those challenges exist all over the place, and it's the biggest barrier that I see from that virtuous circle actually being useful. So then the government's doing its best. I understand the challenges that and the reason why they exist, but really having that as a focus of how fast can you do that translation as a way to really untap the dual use capabilities in this country would be great. And what you see are some, not at the software level, but at the hardware level, as an example, you get some really weird behavior, right? Where if I make something purpose built, for the government, like an ASIC, I don't have anywhere to manufacture it in the country right now. But if I have it dual use, I'm going to be able to source it from anywhere in the globe. Like, that's a broken policy. It's been broken for 2 decades, right? And but it's the type of divide that exists. It's like, okay, what if you just made an ASIC in one of the 5 places you could manufacture on shore right now, right? That don't have a handshake or whatever policy that's needs to be in place for accreditation, right? But you did data driven security around that so that you could actually get the thing that you need, right? So like those are the types of barriers that exist at the manufacturing level, right, at the chip level, at the software level, right, and really figuring out what's the fastest path to accreditation for what we have on shore.
Absolutely, those are solid points. And on that, you mentioned briefly the supply chain concerns. Beyond the regulatory concerns, are there bigger, broader supply chain concerns for us as the dual use area?
I mean, to be honest, I'd be really interested. I'll pass off to Todd. When I was at DARPA, we made some really interesting first principle, like from transistor all the way up, next generation integrated circuits. Those universally sat next to the same chips that Dell is selling to everybody else, right? This idea that it's COTS, and it's COTS because one component was built specifically for the government. It's going to sit next to the rest of the electronic supply chain, the supply base. And so policies that said, because 1/100th of that was purpose built for the government, that's one type of board and has one level of security. and the one that you would buy that's just commercially focused, but you repurpose it for government purposes like Jason's doing, right? They treat those different. That's an example of some of the regulatory barriers that are just fundamentally mismatched.
Absolutely. Todd, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't purport to be a supply chain expert, but Dell Technologies is one of the leading supply chain companies in the world, and and throughout this pandemic, that has been a huge advantage. And the reason is because we decided to be a supply chain company as well, right? A long time ago, we realized that that's a strategic advantage for Dell. And we put those things into place that made sure that that supply chain is uninterrupted. Like a lot of people will just say, that's my supply chain and I rely on it to do whatever it needs to do and let that take care of it. But it's got to be a focus for what you are and how you do business, right? And so, one thing that we are doing is, and we're still evolving our supply chain and we're still evolving how we manage it. There's estimates that say that like just next year, 50% of all supply chain forecasts will be automated using AI. So there's a huge role for technology to play, not just in what you're making, but in how you get the raw materials and the supply chain that you need to make those as well.
Absolutely. And George, you mentioned earlier about some of the companies that just don't want to participate in dual use because frankly it may not be cost effective for them. Are we seeing, and you guys have plenty of experience both in and out of the public and private sector, are you seeing any challenges related to dual use advancement based on commercial companies having to balance the profits versus some other countries around the world where some of the commercial tech has to be integrated into the government and some of those commercial companies don't have a choice? Is that becoming a bigger challenge, a lesser challenge? Are we seeing, in your experience, more people that want to help the government? And I know we have a lot of rules and regulatory concerns that we've touched on, but I'm curious based on some of y'all's experience, where we're going with that, and if we're seeing a trend up or a trend down on commercial folks trying to balance that with working with the government.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brad, because it's hard to measure something you can't see, hear, or touch, right? So like if I'm a company and I've decided not to do engage federal, Department of Defense, et cetera, nobody's asking them because they're not answering, right?
Right.
So I can talk to you from firsthand when I'm dealing with a CEO of my company, and his answer is, George, if you are going to spend $300,000 on a FedRAMP certification program, and that doesn't include the tools, the monitoring, the scanning aspects, and head count that goes with the building of that to achieve a certain certification, and then, oh, by the way, that's just first year cost. And every subsequent year is 70% of the original year cost. You better have opportunity in sales to support that because we are a commercial enterprise. You have to make payroll, you have to make profit and make your sales forecast. So all of those things, I can't tell you how many have not chosen, but I can tell you from firsthand that it is a conundrum or an issue you have to go through. Our company specifically set out in 2014 with a bunch of former GIs, fully expecting that we'd be into federal space. We are, and we have partners and commitments, et cetera, but it has been a thing, right? We have found that working in commercial enterprise with either finance, energy sector, and others, not because they don't have their own standards, but because they are much more amicable and easier to deal with in certain regards than it is to the other side on the federal. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but I feel like I'm scratching at it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That helps. And Bill, it seems like you have something to say, so please chime in on that too.
I do think this is a really interesting moment in time for this, right? So, I go back to, was it Knudsen, right? Who was I believe he was president or CEO of GM, quit his job, became leader of industrial policy for the government, and the Arsenal of Democracy was created, right? So basically last time the commercial world turned its focus and said, we're here to help we're going to actually manufacture at scale. And that was the beginning of World War II.
Great
No,
book, by the way.
obviously it's a different time frame, but it is the last time I think you've got this much commercial focus that's turned around because of the dynamics that are happening. You got $52 billion that's about to be spent on the underpinnings of our supply chain. And frankly, you've got commercial companies' attention up and down that supply chain. And so the question is, can you create that arsenal democracy moment? Right? Or is it yet another sort of, watered down government policy that goes to, so let's say, one company? And so I think it's an interesting next year. And I think it's really essential to figure out whether this grand experiment that a lot of the commercial companies are going through really, pays off. And once you see it pay off, then the natural cycle, right, will happen. Right? Companies are going to be self-interested and motivated by profit. That's their duty bound by their shareholders to do that. Can you balance, right, the fact that there's many companies saying, yes, I understand we're a U.S. company, we're here to help, right, with that motivation. I think that's there's a moment in time that we'll see in the next couple of years how that plays out.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And now I know we've talked, where things are going, where things have been. I want to kick this one to Todd as, what do you see as some really near term, promising innovations that could be incorporated sooner rather than later? I know you do a lot of work with digital twins. So
yeah, great question. I mean, there's so many new technologies that are just kind of starting right now. And, we could talk a lot about a lot of them, but digital twins, I think, are really, really important because they build off of those other technologies, and they a lot of times take over where a lot of the other use cases for smart this and connected this end, right? So from a digital twin point of view, so if you don't know what a digital twin, a virtual representation of an actual physical object, and whether that's an F-35, whether that's a manufacturing facility, whether that's an entire air wing, whether that's an airport. There's all different things that can be digital twins, and what they really do is they give you a couple of different types of insights. There's design insights that give you, like, the virtual product development gives you ability to do that. There's condition insights that give you that predictive maintenance, for example. And then there's decision insights where you can start doing things like predicting how things are going to interact. And, we're working with the Air Force Research Laboratory to do some things around that, like fires integration and coordination, or weapon systems, digital twins, and where they are, how they're stored, how they're attached, how they're operated, and, the maintenance side of it as well. And so we're working with a company, and you probably heard of Mclaren, the F1 racing company. And so Mclaren has done some really interesting. They've been doing digital twins for quite a while. They've done it on their F1 race cars. They have used it to reduce the cost of creating their hypercar by half, and also reduce the time to produce it by half too. I mean, there's real value there. And from the F1 side, we're helping them with that race car, because if you win with a car in the very first race of an F1 and don't make any changes to that car, by the end of the season, that car is going to come in last. So they're using, a Dell supplied on-prem data center that they take to every single one of their races to do that processing of that data and create those digital twins to refine and change that race car. So like 90% of the car is new by the end of the season. So we're helping to bring that to the private sector as well, like partnering with Mclaren and the Air Force Research Laboratory to do digital twins. So thinking about things like, I talked a little bit about the digital twins of an F-35 and how you can simulate how that worked and what went wrong and what kind of different modifications you can make that. But we start to think about really, really important things like non-destructive survivability testing. So you don't have to build something and try and blow it up and see how it survives. Doing virtual work instructions and that type of stuff, and adding on AR and VR. And really you start to look at this digital twin as a framework where you can organize and manage data for everything across your entire operational command. So lots of really interesting things going on there, and a lot, you know, the 5G goes into that, the AI and ML and simulation and advanced analytics, as well as edge compute, you know, all of that's coming together to really form that digital twin and really make it real. I mean, it's accelerating quickly. You know, I know Microsoft's doing a lot of work with that. There's a lot of companies that we're doing work with as well. And it's really exciting space.
So Jason, I know you do a lot of, obviously, with space stuff. So, you know, it could be costly to send some things up there, but, you know, I want to hear, you know, if you guys use digital twins and also what innovations you see.
Yeah, we are doing digital twin work, digital engineering work, and you can see kind of in the press and the media, you know, the kinds of work that we're doing. But I wanted to focus on what I see as promising areas of current innovation. And I think Todd and Bill will like this answer, but machine learning and artificial intelligence have really advanced significantly over the last 10 years. You see it in self-driving cars, you see it everywhere. To a very large extent, we're now able to have satellites do this kind of work, process the data on board and provide it directly to where it needs to go, to the user. Traditionally, all data sets are sent down from the spacecraft to a ground station, and then you've got these large ground footprints to process the data and, you know, transport it where it needs to go. This capability will only continue to advance by leaps and bounds as space scales up.
Absolutely. George, what are your thoughts?
Oh my, so, you know, this will try and weave through all the panel members here, because AI, machine learning, behavioral analytics, all of those are where we see, you know, the current and the trending for future. When we start thinking about the space domain and that environment, how many different low Earth orbit launches and satellites, the increasing footprint there is going to be astounding. At how do we do business? What are the things we're doing in the future that we're doing today in that direction? So Jason, my hat's off to you and to all of your efforts. And the hardware platforms we're using, whether they be, you know, Dell and maybe others I won't mention. And then the artificial intelligence piece that Azure is bringing to the fight, and the volume and the scale, all of those things are extremely huge for us as a company, as we would look forward to, you know, building, triaging, prioritizing alerts from a cyber defense perspective. Because, like, as we were talking about before, small, mid-sized businesses, large businesses, they're not all built the same. So they're not going to have all of the same capabilities, or the same tool sets, or the same environments to operate our hardware platforms. So the way we see that the game going forward is this notion of collective defense. We have to figure a way of reaching out, engaging, and sharing information, because guess what? You know, the adversary is going to try and deny that satellite's command and control channel. They're going to end up hitting supply chains and affecting the manufacturing and the chip side. When you're updating that endpoint, if you're going to the wrong site to download that update and patch, you could be supply side chain attacked as well, among all of the other sides of the equation. We talked about 0-day attacks as well. That, you know, just because we're patching and updating doesn't necessarily mean that somebody doesn't have access on your environment. So that's why we talk about those things: the artificial intelligence, machine learning, behavior analytics, and collective defense.
Absolutely. Bill, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll be brief, but I would say the digital twin is very interesting. I think there's some chats in the or some questions in the chat about, you know, the metaverse. That's such a loaded term. Frankly, I'm not going to touch that. But what I will say is, you know, virtual testing, well before you kind of think of some sort of secondary, you know, overall world, right? That, you know, virtual testing is essential. Like, if you think of algorithmic warfare, And you just think of the complexity of the systems that we're putting together, not just one system, but then multiple systems interoperating together. You need a place to make those judgments and make those, and frankly, mistakes, right? And sort that out. And there is this role of digital twins and very large scale compute, right? To be able to simplify, you're still going to have live testing and absolutely always should, right? But you can have a wealth of information going on behind the scenes to make every live test that much more valuable. If you look at the self-driving car world, right, for every mile that's driven where they're actually training their algorithms, right, there's millions of miles being driven virtually while they're testing what's happening on the road. I don't see the DoD having that level of sophistication yet, but I think it's coming, and they should. So.
Awesome. Well, we're getting close to time. We have a couple of minutes left. Oh, yeah. There's George showing off his toys. But since we only have a few minutes left before David and Scott hop back on, I wanted each of you to take a minute and briefly speak about something that you think that is a key highlight or something that the audience needs to remember. And we'll just go around the horn, and George, we'll start with you, and we'll go from there.
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity. This panel is awesome. And I think, although I mentioned a lot of challenges, that we really are near a tipping point for the next decade to kind of balance the risk and the effort into getting into an adoption of dual use technology to take advantage of the agility, speed, and outcomes that commercial sector can offer. So I'll leave that open and to the rest of my panel members.
Jason, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'll close by saying that while I absolutely believe dual use technologies further our ability to deliver systems faster, innovation is not exclusive just to the commercial industry. I think we heard that from Bill and Todd. That was a common theme from George. The aerospace and defense industry has long been developing cutting edge and groundbreaking technologies that we're using today, and it does go back and forth. I'd also add that in addition to the commercial industry, we must continue to pursue relationships with labs and universities, right, Bill? Kind of that DARPA model that will ensure we're investing in all new sources of game-changing technologies. Over the years, Millennium has developed a playbook for how to find these innovative and game-changing technologies, get it past the TRL valley of death, and then operationalize it. And I'd argue we're the ideal partner because we know our customers, we know our missions and their missions, and we can incorporate those third-party tech rapidly. So I'd also I'd encourage folks to learn more and to consider that your next career may be at Millennium Space Systems. So thanks again for having me today, and this has been a great conversation with the whole panel.
Absolutely. Bill, do you want to go next?
Yeah, no, it's been a great discussion. I mean, I think I'll reiterate what I said earlier, like everything is dual use, frankly. Right? If you go to the transistor level, the transistor that's manufactured is going to be, there are no DoD transistors. There's only transistors that are the pinnacle of what humankind has ever created, the smallest thing, fastest thing that's ever been able to be harnessed by mankind. You go up from that to the chip level, the manufacturing level, we have some inherent advantages across our country because we have been able, right, to be economically successful and national security successful, and try to figure out where that line is. As you walk up, it's not everything needs to be done by commercial companies. It's definitely not the right answer, right? But where we have scale and where we have the ability to do things, a billion times instead of once, right? That niche development that happens to be going on inside the DoD, oftentimes, right, becomes a snowflake. That's where mistakes happen. And so having that cascade from where scale is happening over so that you can still get to the same niche end state is the challenge we have as a country. But I do think they see broad recognition of that. And I think we are going through this grand experiment to figure out exactly how to harness the economic capabilities of the country and apply them to national security.
And Todd?
Yeah, Bill, I that's exactly it. I echo those sentiments exactly. I think every technology is dual use technology. We can't afford to wait as something goes forward. I mean, for example, we started talking a little bit about digital twins, but look at 5G or even the next generation, which is 6G, and look at edge computing and hybrid cloud. We're going to soon be in a situation where 5G or that next generation 6G or whatever they end up calling it is going to be able to allow you to have super computer class compute accessed by just a radio, right? No longer you have to worry about power or, there's a centralized hyper converged compute stack somewhere that is accessible just by a little radio and some sort of device, AR, VR device, right? So our warfighters are out on there and they have this unprecedented access to compute power, right? We can't afford to wait until that's completely mature and out into the market. We've got to develop it jointly. So.
Absolutely. I just want to take a minute. This has been a fantastic conversation. I truly appreciate every single one of you being here, audience included, George, Jason, Todd, Bill. This has been fascinating and it's been a pleasure getting to know you. And I look forward to reaching out and continuing the conversation in the future. And, we'll kick it back to the studio. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Brad. Nice job.
Thank you, Brad. You thanked everybody else, so we'll thank you as well. Well done. Great moderator. And thanks to all of our special guests, and our conversation just continues to be something very special. Ken, what'd you think of them? Aren't they something special?
It was really good, especially that thing at the end where he's like, every technology is dual use technology. Right. That would be, I don't know. It made,
above and beyond. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.